Tom Golden and Janice Fiamingo speak with investigative reporter Eric Coppolino about what happened when Me Too tried to, well, Me Too him. He has much to share about how to navigate these attacks and win. For more content like this, go to menargood.substack.com or menargood.locals.com, where you'll find red pill communities that are free to join and free from censors. Now let's hear from Eric. Men are good, as are you. Indeed, men are good. Oh, yes, they are. As is Janice Fiamingo, and our guest today, Eric Coppolino, who happens to be an investigative reporter who advocates for men and boys. Fancy that. And Janice knows Eric much better than I. So, Janice, can you introduce Eric to everybody?
Yeah, I'm going to formally introduce and read my introduction, which I don't normally do, but it's a complicated story, so I want to kind of outline it for our listeners. I've known Eric now for, I guess, 5 years. Is that right, Eric? About that? We got in touch during the Me Too movement when Eric was having his 15 minutes of unwanted fame in that particular regard. But let me give the introduction, then we'll get into the whole story. So Eric Francis Coppolino is a longtime investigative reporter who investigates financial, land, and medical fraud, especially mass poisoning incidents. So Eric has a whole other realm of expertise that is fascinating in itself. But for our purposes, we're especially interested in his relationship to the Me Too movement. When Me Too began in the fall of 2017, Eric was one of the first writers to criticize its hypocrisy and the myopia of the movement, its focus only on female victims. He published an article with the title, "Men Get Preyed On Sexually Too," back in October of 2017. That's essentially ground zero of the beginning of the movement. And then in January of 2018, he wrote an article with the title, "Take a Step Back," which made the very reasonable, but at the time somewhat inflammatory point that Me Too was dangerous in its determination to dispense with the presumption of innocence and due process. In response, feminists in Eric's hometown, that's Kingston, New York. Am I correct, Eric?
Kingston, New York.
In response, those feminists organized against him, aiming to spread accusations that he was a serial abuser and to get him fired from his jobs. In this, they were only partially successful. They did manage to get him fired from 5 freelance writing positions, from his post as a faculty member at the Omega Institute, and from his column at the Mountain Astrologer. But Eric would not go quietly. He refused to be shamed. He stood up for himself. He researched the accusations against him, and he fought back in various ways. So today we're going to talk about how he did so and his understanding of what was going on at that time. So, Eric, welcome to Men Are Good. Great to have you and wonderful to hear your story and to see you doing well.
Yes, I'm doing just fine.
So I guess maybe the first thing we'll ask you to talk about a little bit is who you were back in 2017. We're especially, I guess, interested in where you stood in relation to the feminist movement, what you thought at the time about claims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Were you concerned at the time about the general climate of dislike, suspicion, and hostility against men and boys? And just any thoughts you have about the whole zeitgeist of the time before you made yourself particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, and I didn't think I was doing so. Thank you both for having me. In 2017, I had fairly well established the things I write about, and they all are part of this serial called Planet Waves, which is a radio program and a column that has a horoscope column. So to some people, I am known the best for having a horoscope column, and for others, as a journalist who covers things like Love Canal and contaminated dormitories where students live, and situations where land conservancies are systematically conquering people's private property. So for many years in my community, I arrived in the neighborhood here in '89. So for for nearly 30 years, I have been doing this type of journalism and very well known for doing it, and respected but considered controversial in that not everyone likes when you do investigative features. I mean, I forced New York State to do a $50 million cleanup of a campus where dioxin got out of PCB transformers. My work on land conservancies violates the fundamentalist religion of, worship these liberal institutions. And though I am a kind of a liberal, I'm also the kind of liberal who will expose corruption in student government and will expose corruption in liberal institutions, right? That's we're supposed to be objective about these things, and that pissed off a lot of people. So, in addition to my whole line of work on sex and gender, there was a kind of a little bit of a Yosemite under the ground of people who did not like the fact that I could almost show up anywhere and take on serious issues. And one of them is the sex, gender, and relationship issues. So in addition to all this, I know I seem like Buckaroo Banzai, but I have I have taught at many tantric and polyamory workshops over the years, and have written quite a lot about sexuality. One of my mentors was Dr. Betty Dodson, the venerated person who brought sexuality, masturbation, and pussies into the feminist movement with her art exhibits and her book, Sex for One. And so, in addition to being politically contentious, I was also sexualizable because I had very plainly, in probably 40 or 50 of my 265 columns in a local magazine, taken on some important matter of authenticity in relationships, not lying to your partner, what polyamory is, commenting on bisexuality, and doing my Betty Dodson piece every couple of years. So that, first of all, established the truth of who I am, but second, it left material floating around that could be built into a kind of a campfire, basically. And by 2017, I was getting skeptical of feminist viewpoint because it seemed to be very mean to men. It seemed to do something it didn't need to do. I was like you. I bought into feminism because I thought it was about equality and respect and mutual dignity. That's what I thought. But it didn't. It turned out to be a different product. And so I was, just when Me Too broke out, I was working with Betty Dodson on a project where we were going to compare her chart to Hugh Hefner. Betty was game for almost anything, and she really dug me as a writer. So we were going to talk, Betty Dodson, the pornographer, look, Hugh Hefner, they have very similar charts. Then the Me Too movement breaks out, and suddenly it seemed like you could just point the finger and men would just disappear from existence.
Yes.
Yes. And they
Like
did
that.
in droves.
They
Yeah.
did. Only men were being accused and only female survivors were being allowed. So when I saw this go on for about a week, I wrote to my editor at the New York Daily News, where I wrote the Daily Horoscope column 7 days a week. And I said, look, I want to do a piece in the Times on the Me Too movement. Do you want right of first refusal? She said, yes. I said, good. She said, go talk to Josh Greenman in the editorial page, who I already knew Josh Greenman and his assistant and loved them. And we did a piece called Men Get Preyed Upon Sexually Too. I had an incident earlier in my life which does not affect me. I made my peace with the person. When he died, we were friends, where there was a mishap. There was a sexual mishap. I was taken advantage of. I was young. I was high. And I said, look, this happens to guys too. Here are the basic circumstances. This happens to men also. We can't just pretend this only happens to women.
Right.
And it was written, I think, a very light touch and very respectful of the whole thing. And Josh kept saying, he's a masterful political writer, who was editorial page editor at the time, said, we've got to write this very carefully to keep you out of trouble. We've got to. So
Yeah.
he was one of those pieces where the editor like rewrites every sentence to make sure
Uh-huh.
that it's. And I'm happy to have that kind of a guidance.
Right.
If I trust my editor, that is fine with me, and it's still my work. And the piece was very well received. There was not a, except behind the scenes on Facebook when we dug all the posts out. In the general public of New York City, the piece was very well received. I thought there was not a single complaint came in. I, of course, shared it
Interesting.
with my readers. I was the horoscope column. This is one of the most popular positions in any newspaper. So I was probably the most visible columnist in the Daily News at that time, on the op-ed page. And it was a perfectly good piece of writing. I mean, they practically stood up in the editorial department when I walked back the first time. It congratulated all around. So that was not an
Uh-huh.
issue. I think it
Right.
set tension. It set up tension because there was something going on in the Me Too movement that it was going to be used as feminist propaganda. And my feeling was, no, if we're going to worry about abuse, we're going to take care of everyone.
Hmm. And that was the point of your article, right? It was not really so much your story. I mean, it was partly your story, but you were
Right.
saying, I'm telling this story not to claim my own trauma or suffering or anything
Victimhood.
like that, because
Right.
I dealt with it and it wasn't that bad. But I want to make it clear that other men should feel that they can speak out.
Yes,
And, that was, now that we understand what Me Too was really about, which was about accusing men and demonizing men and presenting men as the universal predators and women only being the victims. That was a very radical thing to say. Did you
Yes.
get contacted by any men saying thank you because I too had something happen to me and I've been, unwilling or unable to speak about it? Was there that kind of response?
must have. It was a lot of activity. It was my most successful story. I
Yeah,
mean, I became,
yeah,
in a way I was not expecting to. I was amazed at for the whole series,
yeah.
what it provoked. No, I don't remember specifically. And we did post everywhere throughout the thing. Get in contact with us. Get in contact
Right.
with us.
Mm-hmm.
Mothers got in contact with me because, as an astrologer, what I mostly do is I counsel middle-aged women. They're the ones who come in with the astrologer. So I'm not a therapist, but you can talk to me about anything. One of the reasons I was suspect of the whole, so a lot of middle-aged women tell me about mothering. They tell me about their parenting, and they confide in me. They trust me because I'm trustworthy. And uh, this has included every form of sexual violation. But in decades of listening to women tell me about every form of sexual violation, I had never heard a single incident about a workplace incident. I heard everything else, every other permutation. And suddenly now everybody's talking about the workplace and
Right.
all the bad things that happen there. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. I've just done this informal 25-year survey of everything that's ever gone wrong in the life of a woman, and not one time have I heard of anything happening in a meeting room, a supply room, in the boss's office or anything. Like, how is this even possible that there can be such a complete
So,
disparity?
yeah.
Well, we expect a little overlap, here and there, but a total disparity that
Yeah.
got me suspicious. And so this is why I began to take a step back, asking a question like, what is this really about?
Right. Hmm.
Hesitatingly and intensively. Between the two articles, I covered the developments as they were happening, and I started to look at it from an environmental perspective of, this is in the environment. This has nothing to do with anyone's behavior. And one of the most important guests I had was a revered women's empowerment trainer who's one of my clients, Kasia Urbaniak, who is a former dominatrix, a former Buddhist high priestess, who then has gone, who now does these. I think you would love to be a fly on the wall at these workshops, Janice. So sitting in the back of the room, where women are brought into the into the front of the room. There's a man in the hot seat, and the woman has to say something like, "You are wearing a pink shirt." And I watched the women one at a time have panic attacks, unable to tell me that I was wearing, at that time, a purple tie. I was one of the guys chosen as a volunteer for this. The woman couldn't say to me, "You're wearing a purple tie." Crazy stuff. So Kasia, very observant person. So she was on my program on Radio Kingston. I was doing my best to do a very balanced survey of the whole situation. Really, I didn't have an axe to grind with anyone, really. I was just concerned that you could just point and then the guy would disappear.
Right.
All people, Senator, I can never remember his name.
Al Franken?
Al Franken from Saturday Night Live, who made the mistake of resigning.
Yeah.
Let him bring the procedure. What do you got to lose? You're never going to be higher than a senator. Maybe you'll be president. Okay. But look at people are supporting Trump accused of felonies. I don't think it would have mattered. And it was Kirsten Gillibrand going after him, my U.S. senator going after him. So so I wrote a report that came out February 1st, January 25th, a week ahead. And what prompted me was Daphne Merkin at the Times wrote a piece called "Publicly We Say Me Too, Privately We Have Misgivings."
Right.
And around the same time, I sent an email out to my entire list, of kind of a Substack before a Substack existed. And I said, tell me your personal experiences. How do you feel about this? Has any of this helped you? And the overwhelming majority of my readers and my clients were suspect of the whole thing. They said things like, whatever happened to kick him in the balls?
Yeah.
This is what was in Take a Step Back. Whatever happened to kick him in the balls? I'm like, wow, that's a great quote. And certainly I think indicative of my balance on the story. Quoting prominent feminist, the author of Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, telling the story of, we know this one, I'm sure, where she stood up for someone and was accused of being a sympathizer. So,
yeah.
Stephen
Galloway. Yeah, it's a fantastic. I mean, it's not a fantastic story. It's a horrible story. But yeah, she found out that even being who she was, she couldn't say that a professor of creative writing who was accused of the most heinous sexual assault in his own office, that he deserved due process. Stephen Galloway at the University of British Columbia. And the minute she said that, she was suddenly persona non grata. He lost his job. The whole thing turned out to have been a put on. It was a woman he was having an affair with who then went crazy and accused him when they ended their affair and he married somebody else. That's what it came down to. And she claimed he sexually assaulted her in his office. He couldn't possibly have done it, aside from the fact that he didn't do it, because there were students coming in and out of the office constantly the day she claimed he sexually assaulted her. And yet he lost his job over that. So that's what happened during Me Too. And even a woman like Margaret Atwood, with the best feminist bona fides in the world, couldn't object.
The modern leader of the feminist concept, and I think an erudite person. I don't think she's a fool. I think that those are interesting books. So this was all troubling to me as a journalist, particularly as one who covers sex and gender. This is right in my wheelhouse.
And at this point, you didn't feel, I assume, oh, sorry.
Yeah, hundreds of pieces on this over the years.
And so at this point, Eric, you didn't feel, you probably didn't feel, you weren't thinking about protecting yourself. You were in your journalist, your investigative reporter kind of mode, and you were interested in having a conversation, and you believed it was possible to have that conversation. Would that be right?
Very, very fair to say. Also, I had nothing to be accused of. I live transparently. I live openly. I've written about way too much. Every possible thing that any psychoanalyst could extract from a person is already on the internet. I'm truthful about my sexuality. I'm truthful about my beliefs. I present myself as I am. If it was Trump and Biden in those two other little circles, I'd be the same person. My mother and my father, or any two random girlfriends, I'd be the same person. So I live transparently, and I have to credit Betty Dodson, that way back when I first met her, said, probably in our first conversation, she said, so let me get this right. You're an investigative reporter covering Monsanto. You write about sex and masturbation, and you're an astrologer. Uh-huh. You must have no secrets whatsoever. First conversation, have no say. I'm like, well, I usually live that way, but that's a good start. So this was really the golden parachute, and it gave me credibility with my own readers. I mean, I didn't lose any of my own subscribers over this. I was already fully developed as a character in their minds over bringing my growth process to my writing process, published widely over the years. Whether writing my horoscope was just as saucy no matter where I put it, including the Daily Mail. I mean, so that's how we got. And what happened was these local yokels thought, we can analyze all their motives individually, and the fact that the horoscope was the most popular feature in the magazine, and that I was in the Daily News and they weren't, and et cetera, et cetera. But what they said was they planted a letter to the editor in Chronogram accusing me of consensual sex. The whole thing gets started on an accusation. I know Tom's making a face. Consensual sex. I'm like, really? Now that's that too? Oh, so maybe sex feminism is anti-sex, and maybe this is just an anti-male pro-censorship movement. That's what I was. And it seemed to go over everyone's head that it was, without any details given, not a single detail, but it was consensual, and it happened 22 years earlier. It's like, wow, what's wrong with this picture? But it was enough to cause a moral panic, and there was enough stuff brewing from my articles on polyamory and the fact that I had a photo studio right on Main Street for 10 years. But it's my style to put the photo studio on Main Street, not on a side street, right? If you're going to have a photo studio, put it right on the main drag. So there was material floating around, but to give you an example, they had accused me of consensual sex 22 years ago, and we'll get to the investigation, which was a farce, but that was what I'm being about in an investigation. Did you have consensual sex 22 years ago? Well, I must have.
Yeah.
They were looking for anything. They were looking for anything.
Somebody willing. So
wait a minute though, Eric, let's back up one sec, because you slipped that in there.
That accusation, right?
So this all the accusations began then, right? It wasn't until you published Take a Step Back.
3 months later, April 4th.
Okay, so you published Take a Step Back, then there was stuff started brewing, and then in early April, what did it happen that the first accusation came, and I missed what you said about the form that it came in, and then how did it build after that?
I published a letter to the editor that was severely truncated. That kind of got the ball rolling, and I was not told in advance. Normally, your editor tells you when there's going to be a letter to the editor about you. You get a chance to reply on the spot. So they were in on it. They were, and the men, don't forget to ask me why the men went along, because there's two very important reasons for that. Why the men went along. This is crucial for this one especially.
Yes.
And then it starts on Facebook, and I'm accused of things like asking to pet a dog, which was construed as sexual harassment. Now, I'm pretty sure that when we're done with this call, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to go look for a dog to make out with. So with all the dogs is like, I'm the neighborhood guy that makes out with all the dogs. Like, that's just how.
Yeah.
I met them all. They're, I say hello to them through the windows and stop my car when they're walking down the street. Talk about an accusation designed to break someone's spirit and also do I seem like I love dogs? To take something normal and turn it into something that. But what the funny thing was is it didn't matter how small and non-existent and petty asking. My response was, well, you're saying I have bad boundaries. Why did I ask to pet the dog? I would have just met it. I would have just walked up to it and pet it if I had bad boundaries. It's not comporting. Uh, so there was a delay there were several stages of this, but I was out very quickly with my coverage. And I did something that might be ill-advised, except that in my case, I had no choice, was I covered the issue myself. And covering it for me went by, the letter came out April 1st. By April 2nd, I had a team on it. It took each day I had a team set up.
So you knew, did you know right away, Eric, that this was something you had to take seriously? Like, did your red alert go off at that point?
Yeah, sure. Especially when I saw it blow up on Facebook. And so they thought they were taking out an astrology column. Like, that was what they were all upset about. Was it such a popular column and he's fooling everyone, and he makes them think he's a good guy, but really he's asking to pet a dog behind the scenes, right? What else is he?
Yeah.
So I knew this was serious very quickly, and
they actually formed an organization, right, to do this. I mean, this is
Me Too Kingston.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, whoa.
With like 3 followers. So I have a team approach to whatever I do, and so very quickly I organized a team around this. And Cindy Ragusa was on it from the first 60 seconds. We have preserved. I mean, this is a tiny slice of the case record. I mean, this is a list of the exhibits, and we just in one pleading. And so we're good at documenting things on rapid fire. I mean, between midnight and 5 a.m., we can have a whole story mapped out. So Cindy's got a little bit of clairvoyant to her, and she loves me. And so she was basically tracking everyone's social posts. Then they're organizing through this horseshit thing called the Hudson Valley Feminist Collective. And they said, we have this post. He's not that good of a journalist. He's never going to know what we're saying in here. And meanwhile, Cindy's sending me every screenshot of every last thing that they're saying. So they're busy underestimating me. I'm busy thinking, this is serious. Where's it going to go? And I can look back at it reflectively now. It was very painful at the time, but I will still say we did not miss the humor at any point. And we definitely had more fun than they did.
And so what was their what was their MO then? Did they write letters to editors at the papers where you published? Like, is that how they went about saying you were an abuser and you had to be fired? Because you did get fired from a bunch of freelance positions, right?
Well, so first of all, it's like a junior high school here. And it's that small. I mean, this town is smaller than my university campus. 27,000 at Buffalo, 22.5 here in Kingston. So there's only about 50 people who run everything or think they run. And all this happened mostly on my city block. That was where the chronogram office was. It was where the local papers were located, and the radio stations across town.
I see.
But all in a very tight area. So it were easy boats to rock, and everyone was connected through, I will not name him, but the local billionaire philanthropist. They're all connected through him, and he's the one who gave the order to just cut me loose. One billionaire philanthropist whose name you would know, and I know this because one of my sources is the receptionist at, I can't say which institution, but who took the call from the person and typed the memo.
I see. Wow.
They're all saying, I'm never going to really know how any of this happened. And we're tracking the whole thing on paper the entire time and setting up a discovery operation from day one. Now, this is very, very difficult. I've got a friend who reached out to me last night whose brother was falsely accused of something. I'm hanging out at a friend's house with my phone, and I'm handling on my phone email all day yesterday. I'm like, you've got to start collecting pleadings, documents. You've got to get organized. You've got to set up a discovery operation. I said to my friend, I request advise you be the person who keeps track of all the paperwork outside the lawyer's office. Know the status of every pleading on the calendar. Who's his attorney? This is, once criminal charge is made, it's not a normal Me Too. The MO of Me Too is innuendo, or I call it insinuendo.
Yeah.
When the criminal charges are involved, it focuses it. It brings it to a point of focus.
Right.
And you the same way in any event. So from my viewpoint, it's document, and it's very hard though. I mean, I am made of tough stuff, and as an investigative reporter, I am used to being assaulted in various ways. I've been arrested. I've been thrown off the SUNY New Paltz campus. I've sued the state of New York in federal court to get my First Amendment rights back. I'm even the New York Times said he draws strength from being disliked, right? In a column about
It's a good quality.
It is. Yeah.
I'm sensitive too. I'm really you can tell I'm not like Chuck Armstrong. So anyway, this is what we did. We documented every last thing, and before they and then places start to fire me, and before they know what happens, I'm dragging to the New York State Division of Human Rights. I filed sexual harassment and wrongful firing complaints against all of them, which I knew were not going to go anywhere, except that it forced everyone besides me to lawyer up. I never hired a lawyer. I had friends advising me, but I didn't spend a penny in legal fees. They all did. So I'm dragging them all up to Albany for investigations and had the exquisite pleasure of watching them lie to investigators. I'm thinking, wow, this is who these people are. I just kind of sitting there.
Wow. So all this happened, Eric, this all happened then within like what, a month, after the initial 2 months?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing though. I intended this as a journalism project, and it turned out to be sometimes the reporter gets stuck in the story. It just happens.
Yes.
You just can't, I don't aspire to that, but sometimes it happens, and you just have to be as objective as you are and do your best to tell the story. But what it all turned out to be was a probe. I said things in Take a Step Back that happened to be true. All of that was true, or there would not have been such a fuss. There wouldn't have been this.
Exactly.
It was a reaction formation. They were like, wow, the lady sure is protest the thing quite a bit here. What on earth is going on? So I played it out, and I just went with it at that point. I had no choice but to go with it. I had no choice. That was it.
Can you tell the story of when the meeting that you had with them?
The investigative hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And God bless my therapist and teacher, Joseph Trusso, for being right there for this. So the magazine that I had worked for 22 years, where I knew everyone and hung out and went to all their parties and lived with the guy's mother for a while. And right, this is a small town, right? They couldn't pretend they didn't know who I was, right? They just couldn't pretend, but they tried. Anyway, they decided, we're going to get out in front of this. We're going to have an investigation. So they hire a professional sexual misconduct investigator named Ryan Poscablo. And Poscablo's claim to fame was he had served as an assistant United States attorney working under Preet Braha, the venerated New York State, Manhattan Federal Prosecutor's Office. So big macha. They're bringing up a big macha. And they gave me 3 dates to choose from for the meeting. They wanted 3 hours of my time. I thought, we'll have a good chance to straighten things out here. I did all the astrology. I picked the best date. I called up Joe. He said, yeah, we'll have it in my counseling room. And what I did was my first MO to subvert them was to have the meeting in a counseling room and not in a lawyer's office. Because I thought, these people all need therapy. Well, let's get a therapist. So instead of coming to a place where they're accustomed to with fluorescent lights and tables and no stenographers, I'm sure, but fluorescent lights and tables, they're suddenly sitting in a rustic therapist room.
Right.
With Joe, who came up in the 70s, and one of these guys who can do group therapy, who back from the days of group therapy, you can track 10 or 12 people in the circle and know whose issues are what. And I also thought, well, since I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead and a journalist, I'm going to bring my Deadhead taping gear and set it up in the room. So it's a big tripod and digital recorder, a second digital recorder as a backup unit, and we waited and they walked in, and the lead attorney threw a shit fit that I was recording from before he walked in. And I said, Brian, we're in a one-party state. You're a former U.S. attorney. You're admitted in New York. We're in a one-party state. You know that I could have 20 video cameras trained on you and not say a word. And he tried to make it into a consent issue. I didn't consent to this. But that protestation lasted 90 seconds by the clock. And 1 minute and a half after they walked in, I watched them file out the door to figure out what the hell to do about this complete subversion of their modus operandi, which was to document it. So to those who are listening, I don't care what people are saying you did or think you did or believe you did. You want to document everything that is said to you and about you. I mean, I wore a pen recorder for months. I just had a spy recorder that I just wore on my shirt pocket for months. So anybody would walk up to me. I was walking, Mossad basically. And these recordings all were transcribed. They came in very handy. And finally, the guys come back. The investigator and a woman lawyer and a woman paralegal, note taker, come back into the room, and they're like, "Well, you can record if we can record." I'm like, "I'll send you my recording if you want. If you want, I'll send you the transcript." So they recorded. I'm like, "And what? You people don't record these things anyway?" So the MO is clear that the meeting is not recorded. They could say anything they want. The reason they ran out, and look, in any fight, when you're looking at your adversary's ass in 90 seconds, you won.
Yeah.
So that's never turn their. That's it. That's going belly up. They surrendered, and they knew coming in that they had nothing.
And that is one really important point for people to hear who may be falsely accused: is record. ABC, always be record. ABR, always be recording.
Don't worry about the one-party state thing.
Yeah, you got to think about that. What else would you recommend people do, Eric?
Worry about that later. Worry about that later. Don't worry about it now. It's not an issue until someone comes up and contests it. And then you say, really? Your only excuse is that it's illegal to record one party in this state, and that's the best you can do? You want to throw the recording out on procedural grounds? Well, here's 20 quotes from the recording, or send me a court order or whatever. But it does not mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's not valid. You just make your documentation. You just document everything.
Yep.
So we knew how to do this. That's the thing. Like, we've done this so often, and most people are going to be intimidated by an assistant United States attorney descending from the ivory tower.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what they wanted.
And to make sure that, first of all, I've talked to a lot of different people, including a lot of powerful men. And one thing you learn how to do when you're talking to powerful men is you keep your sense of humor, and you get on the level with them. You treat them. You might look up to them. I recognize a superior officer. That's fine. But I find that the more powerful people in general are, the more real you are with them, the better you're going to do from the get-go. Put on no airs whatsoever, and you be yourself, and you say what you say, and don't worry too much about it. So I had a lot of practice talking to powerful people. They were obviously misunderestimated on what they were getting into, and then they bring their litany of. I think they accuse me of 4 things. They accuse me of consensual sex. Did you go hiking in 1996 and have sex? I'm like, no. I went hiking. I did not have sex with this person. Never happened. Like, never happened. Never happened.
Huh.
Then the big accusation in the meeting was, you're going to love this. Have you at any time in the last 5 to 10 years made women uncomfortable?
Right.
God.
That's the classic.
This was the gem. This was the Hope Diamond of the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this is like, how big of a stretch can you have? And my therapy is Gestalt tradition, right? So when the word make comes up in Gestalt, the person made me do it. The therapist line is, well, who had a gun?
Yeah, really.
Right?
Yeah.
She made you do it. Well, was she pointing a gun at you? Well, no. Well, then she didn't make you do it. Was she brandishing a knife? And no, she didn't make you do it then. So, well, they were trying to insinuate that my journalism was intentionally designed to make people uncomfortable. They didn't have anything. So using all of their little prods and probes to try to get me to admit to something. And I didn't give them a millimeter. I mean, I didn't give them a single millimeter. And they said, do you make women uncomfortable? I said, what do you mean by uncomfortable? And they said, you define it. I said, no, it's your word. You define it. And I reached for the dictionary on my therapist's mantle. There's a dictionary there to settle these types of disputes. This is bullshit therapy. So I'm reaching for the dictionary to look up the word uncomfortable, and they fold their cards a second time, and they walk out. It's not cooperating.
Yeah.
He wants to look a word up in the dictionary.
Yeah.
They needed you to be ashamed and to feel guilty.
Yes, that's
and
it.
you refused that. You said, fuck that.
Not going to happen. And I said to them right in the discussion, you're now in my movie. This is journalism. This is an article. I'm an investigative reporter. I flashed my press card, right? I didn't literally do it, but I said, you're on the record. I'm a journalist. You're in my movie now. This is my story. And they said, well, we don't know about that. I know. And so I was able to take this kind of gutsy approach to it. It's the only way I do things, really. And I wasn't going to just go, let them do this to me.
Right.
So I had my antithesis to all that they were doing. And ultimately, I spent $4,000 promoting this on Facebook. I mean, every article I wrote, I promoted it. I used the Woodstock zip code and Midtown Manhattan, and I spammed Facebook for 3 months with all of my coverage, and made sure that everyone. Some of these pieces got 50,000 impressions. That's a lot for a small area.
Yeah.
And so by the time they caught up with publishing anything off of Facebook, the story had already been laid out. But I pinned down the 4 corners of the truth, right? I nailed everything. I was publishing transcripts. I was publishing the recordings. They didn't have anything except then to collect more insinuendos. So then they, in a newspaper article, they accused me of saying that I was polyamorous. And it never happened. There was no dinner party. I'm out of the closet as polyamorous, but at the time I had a monogamous girlfriend. We who are polyamorous are capable of having monogamous commitments. And they said she was there at this dinner party. And that I must have been implying a three-way. I'm thinking, no, if you knew Danny, you didn't call her up and ask for her. So we have to believe women except the ones that just count their views. Another one. Yeah. We believe women who we agree with. If we don't agree with you, we don't believe you. But
right.
We believe
exactly.
women who we agree with. So this went on. This dragged on basically all through the summer, and they made my life very, very uncomfortable. And but nonetheless, I'm a better writer than all of them combined, and my team was right fucking on it. We were right on it. I mean, and I had, a lot of support, from people around me, people writing me letters of reference, for, saying this is ridiculous. What are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
But you've really outlined, Eric, a number of things that people can do if they are falsely accused. Maybe we
Well,
can go over those. One is document everything.
yes. Yeah, you can
Keep,
sum up pretty good. Yes, document everything.
and next might be record. Keep
That's documenting. Yes.
keep recording over and over again. The
Yep.
third might be aware of your own shame and guilt and how that might play into things. Is that
They
fair?
That's the Velcro. That's the other side of the Velcro. And if you don't have that, it's useless.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
can't have Velcro, doesn't work. So that's important.
So,
Documenting,
yeah, don't get sucked into apologizing for
no,
things.
never.
Really?
That, right, that in
And
an attempt to ward off the accusation by actually accepting something that
and
has been put to you, because that is such a technique
yes.
that's used.
Oh
Yes.
boy. And the other thing is, Eric, you gathered a team.
Lawyer technique also to drag you in. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So next might be make this something where people know about it, because they shame grows when no one knows,
Yes.
and so does guilt. And so tell people, gather your team together so you can be a part of something rather than just being a single person who's getting whipped. You know?
You definitely behind the scenes. You need a team now. You need supporters. You need somebody
Yes.
who's you're going to be messed up. You're not going to be happy about this, and there's
Yes.
not. But it's also working in your own defense is a good way to keep your head together. Well, it gives you something useful to do, and take it easy on yourself, and find the love and support where you need it. My mo is always, when in doubt, go public.
Right.
This does not work for everyone, but it
Right.
works really good for me.
Yes.
Uh,
And it worked in this situation very well.
yes, very, very well, because
Yes.
it was really a sunshine is the best disinfectant kind of a situation.
Exactly.
And I named names. I mean, I named all their names. I kept putting out basically
Huh.
press releases and saying this is a trolling operation. Here are the trolls. They're trolling us on Hudson Valley Feminist Collective. They never busted Cindy. They were never able to find out what her identity was. So we were in the room when they were making all their plans. So you need intelligence. You need to call people up and find out what's going on. I realize you might not be in the mood to do this, and the stakes are
Right.
very different when it's criminal.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you still take the same basic procedures. You must have a lawyer whose motto is go to trial. We're going to trial. You never admit anything. In my view, you never quit from anything. You make people aggress on you. If that's what this is about, if you're going to be aggressive, go ahead, aggress.
Yes.
Because if you resign, that is a constructive admission that any of this even had a point. If you voluntarily resign, but if you are fired, that must be justified, and you're preserving your rights to contest being fired. You can't contest resigning.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly
Yeah.
right.
I know people think I'm going to make this go away by quitting, but
Uh-uh.
Right.
it's not help.
Right.
It's not. It does not
Right.
help.
Exactly.
What
Yeah.
other? I mean, so
You
I
wanted us to ask too about the men who comply, because that is one of the things that's so startling, is that these accusations come in and almost immediately many men then will just do what the women are asking for. They fire the guy, they publish the letter against you without even telling you it was coming. Like, they immediately fold. There seems to be no reasonable solidarity or commitment to
right.
natural justice.
yep. So there's two things mainly going on. One is the threat of extortion. You could be next, and all the guys
Yeah.
know this.
Huh.
They know, especially the more ridiculous the accusations are. Asking to pet a dog, the wearing sunglasses at night in a nightclub, um, polyamorous, and it's getting that much attention. The guy's like, "Oh my God, I've done worse things."
Yes.
Yeah.
I
I
am
could be
sure
next.
people involved at Chronogram who had really been inappropriate in the line of duty. I would bet a large amount of money on that, and that they were the ones given a pass for their comments and remarks in the office where I never really was, but I could see the dynamic, and I heard bits because people tell me things. Uh, so the guys know that maybe they're going to come after them next.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The second thing is, I had I called men's support group meetings in my then fairly large studio and was working with a men's group in the area where the guys got what was going on, and the men at my men's group were saying things like, I would tell the truth about this, but my girlfriend's going to withhold sex or throw
Yep.
me out.
Yep.
So you get two forms of extortion. You get pseudo Lysistrata, and that'd be a good pen name. And then the extortion angle. Well, if we can get him for petting a dog, we can get you for the last 50 things you said in the office and all your sexy jokes. Oh, now it comes out that Mr. So and
Mm-hmm.
so told off-color jokes, since
Yeah.
1983 or 2000. We didn't say anything. So that's the men. The men are goaded. The men are goaded to
Yeah.
go on.
That's right. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Good
And they're already
analysis.
blue pilled. I mean, they're already blue pilled. They're already
Yeah.
thinking in terms of how can I help this woman?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it just
That too.
flows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them just have a knee-jerk impulse to do the thing the woman asks because
Save the
that
woman.
shows what very good men they are,
Yes.
and they don't think about. They immediately unperson the man, even if he's somebody they've known for many years. They
Yep.
immediately think, well, he must have done something bad
Yep.
to be being
Yep.
attacked in this way. So yeah, their gut reflex is to act chivalrously. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
there's that too. But
And
yeah,
go ahead,
go ahead, Don.
Janice. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm thinking while you're talking, one thing I was thinking about was that when these accusations come at a large institution like a university, where they are now often coming to, they actually have systems in place where you cannot respond. I mean, that's how insidious they are. You're
Yeah.
not allowed to what they call retaliate. You just have to stay quiet. They tell you can't speak about it.
Oh
I mean,
boy.
it's
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 crazy.
yeah, it's so unfair, and they take away the avenues of self defense from men. In your case, I did want to bring up you had you had many things working in your favor. You already had an established reputation. You already had a whole group of people who knew you and believed in you and didn't care what kind of accusations were made. So all of that helped you.
Yes.
And you also had a woman who came forward and actually, about a year after, I guess, things had
Yeah, I was going to
broken.
say, when you do it right like Eric does, you get things like the quote from this woman. And let's look at this
And she wrote
quote
a
right
whole
now.
letter.
Yeah.
Letter.
Yeah, maybe could you give us just the background? This was a woman who had been involved in the Me Too Kingston group to take you down, but
That's what
she did
Ashley.
eventually come forward and confess that it was all based on nothing.
Yeah. She and I had a mutual friend named Journey Truth, a 105-year-old black woman who lived up in Rosendale. And she was probably my most avid fan. And
Huh.
I like when old people like my writing. If you give me 10 or 100 young fans or 105-year-old fan, I'll take the old lady. And Wojciechowski was one of her caregivers. Obviously, she
Mm.
a lot of
Huh.
help. And Journey Truth said, uh, "Go help him."
Huh.
And instead, she went and she joined the movement because it was so exciting.
Wow.
Huh.
So Journey sent her to assist, and then she felt really really bad about it and contacted me in the late summer of 2019, maybe a year and 3 4 months later, and I said, "Good, we're going to have this conversation on Planet Waves FM, and you're going to put something in writing." So I was clear, and I held her to it. I made sure it happened. I made sure the letter said the things it needed to say, and I have the whole paper trail
Yep.
on all of this in case someone tries to question it.
Yes.
Um,
And this
she,
quote is just very
and
potent.
people were very angry about what they perceived to be misogynist writing which includes a quote like, "Why not kick him in the balls?" I mean, I don't know any misogynists who would say, "Ladies, if you're upset with the guy, kick him in the balls." That's not a very misogynistic thing to say. And for women being teachers, I think that made them the most angry. At the end, step back. I said, "Women, you have a good example. If you want men to do the right thing, you've got to do the right thing."
Yes.
So, meanwhile, he comes forward with this admission and sitting right at his desk, 2.5 hours of audio plus 2-page written admission that the entire thing was a scam.
Yep. And I love this quote here. It was much easier and frankly more soothing to my ego to go along with the attempts to annihilate Eric. And
I mean, you
that to me says a lot. I mean, that is the sense of Me Too, is people are going along with stuff. Just they're blinding, going along with it just to annihilate so that they can feel a little better.
yeah, and it's a religious movement. There's a book that
Yeah.
it's called Woke Racism.
Huh.
My copy by John McWhorter at Columbia, conservative black professor, proper conservative, like think tank conservative, wrote a deconstruction of the entire woke movement as being a religious zealotry. They're religious zealots, and
Yes.
that's why there's no
Yes.
facts. That's why facts are completely thrown out. It's a faith-based movement on this horrible concept of faith, and that's why people just go along with this stuff.
Yep.
And I want to
Yep.
point out that when this all happened, I had never heard the word deplatforming. I had never heard the term cancel culture.
Huh.
I have more important things on my mind. I learned about that from this experience, and that
I bet you did.
deplatforming is not for necessarily doing something wrong. It's when people don't agree with you.
Yes.
They
That's
take the
it.
platform away because they don't agree with you. Wow, I didn't. That wasn't my concept of free speech that I grew up with my whole life as an editor.
Crazy, crazy.
Once misquoted
Yeah.
or mischaracterized in the press, ever, ever. I've been quoted copiously in newspaper articles and TV reports and radio interviews, and was never once badly treated publicly.
Right. Right.
Another really strange facet of this experience.
Yep.
And it made me question every single thing I read in newspaper, especially around this, that I assume it's all a lie until
Yes.
someone
Hmm.
shows me proof. But I'm the same way about every other story I do. They're like, "Well, what about the refrigerator trucks?" I'm like, "I didn't go in there to see all the dead bodies," talking about COVID. They said, "Well, there were refrigerator trucks." I said, "There's not a refrigerator truck full of corpses," till I went in the thing and touched their toe, made sure it was a real toe. That, so I take this kind of blood and guts approach to journalism. No matter what I am doing, I prefer to stay out of war zones, but not culture culture war zone.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
You
And you
jump
have
into those, Eric.
basically, oh,
Culture war zone.
and you have
So
basically said that you think every single Me Too accusation deserves to be fully adjudicated because probably who knows what
yeah,
percentage of those, perhaps 100%, but probably a very, very high percentage of those were simply false. And I
yep,
felt that too,
Yep.
that we will never know the number of falsely accused men who just folded under the pressure, who did resign, who went quietly away and were never heard from again, who committed suicide,
Yep.
who
suicide.
died in shame, who
Yes.
had heart attacks or strokes or whatever because of the stress of being unpersoned and deplatformed, as you
Yeah.
say. It really
Person.
is remarkable. There's a book called uh, How to Destroy a Man Now.
Yeah,
The Damn Handbook. It was written anonymously, and he goes through just in 2017, just in that fall period, the number of high profile men, not lower profile that nobody even knows about,
Right.
who were just toppled in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, in media and publishing, and it's just extraordinary. The list goes on for pages,
Huh.
and almost none of those men were ever criminally tried. They were just accused and forced out,
Yep.
fired, or resigned.
Yep.
yep.
It's Yeah.
by public shaming. And, I question whether this whole shame them publicly has any effect anyway. Not only do I think that almost every one of the, look, obviously by some law of odds, somebody had to have done something somewhere, but I'm thinking in the high 90th percentile were completely baseless, and were never actually looked at in any detail or investigated. It was just pure religiosity, pure knee jerk, and we have to be careful of this in other walks of life also. So the Me Too movement was a manifestation of a place and a time. I think there was a lot of anger and pussy grabbing and things like this, and I think that a lot of what happened in 2017 was pure psyop. I mean, the joke I've had about the Me Too movement was whoever wrote the memo proposing this should get a raise and a promotion. I think it came out of some kind of a public relations firm where they thought, this is what we can do now. This is what the time is right to do. We can get it. We can get away with this now. And the Overton's window is always going to be open in a little bit different place. There's always going to be a different thing that you can accuse someone of. Now it's anti-Semitism. Now everyone's anti-Semitic. Anything that you say, if you don't like matzah, you're anti-Semitic. Well, so this is the new one, and the window is going to keep shifting. Also, there was a bit here about video killing the radio star. I mean, this was a digital attack. I'm a print writer. I'm a scribal personality. I prefer to write in pencil. And so there was a little bit of like, we're going to kill print daddy, because I was still going strong in the print genres.
Right.
And so there was that. And a lot of this was infused by the psychosis of the digital environment, where things are appropriate there that are not appropriate other places and other times, that you couldn't get away with this. People would be much more inclined to reason than they are now, and less thinking, oh, well, suddenly this is going to be all over Facebook. Yeah. So that's held as a threat against people. And so we have to learn how to handle ourselves in this environment.
And one of the things we'll do is we'll leave a link below to Eric's site, Planet Waves. If you want to learn more about Eric and the things he's doing, that'll be a good place to go. Right, Eric? Where else?
It's the best place to go. Yeah. And my Substack at planetwaves.org, I'll send you those links.
Planetwaves, yeah.
Planetwaves.org.
Good.
The reality of this is I continue to do what I do straight through the entire thing. I never stopped my program. I never stopped teaching sex. I never stopped writing articles. And I mock them with satires the entire time.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that.
This is really the secret weapon in the arsenal of political survival. Is I did some of my most brilliant satires over the course of 2 years on them. Phony interviews with them, admitting everything. My investigative pieces were my best. Tom Wolfe, tell it like it is, and don't forget to point out how hilarious things are when they are, and how tragic they are when they're tragic. I was very concerned for the boys who are seeing this happen, for the young men who may not speak up, who may not admit they follow an astrology column or a relationship column. To see this happening to someone so easily, I felt I had an obligation to the men and the boys around me to stand up for myself and to show how it's done. And I may be the only person who didn't quit from anything. I didn't admit to anything. I didn't apologize for anything, because I had nothing to quit from and nothing to apologize for. And and no matter what you think you did, it doesn't matter. You don't apologize, and none of this belongs on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram anyway. Yeah. None of it. That's them all seeking 15 minutes of world fame. By the way, I didn't mention one of the things that made me the most irritated about the Me Too movement was everybody who made a Me Too claim, suddenly their publicist was busy that day. Suddenly they got trotted through the New York City papers. They sold a few thousand albums. They picked up a few thousand more followers. And so it was a free ride on 15 minutes of world fame for anyone. That I thought was very disturbing. And I thought, you have, and I kept saying this, if you have a problem, as someone who's handled a lot of assault and incest cases, if you have a problem, go to therapy and take care of it. Don't go to Twitter.
Exactly.
Don't make it a public issue. You've got an issue, take care of yourself. If you're in pain, if you've suffered something, if you've been transgressed, if someone's hurting you, get help, real help.
And learn how to be offended. I mean, it's an art, you know. Let yourself be offended.
The offended is another part, and I think a lot of the Me Too, I talked about this with Janice, I think, where offended translated to personally injured. And
Yes.
I'm saying there are people listening who have had bad things happen. Bad things happen.
Yes, yes,
Bad things have happened to you. Get professional help.
yes.
Don't go to Twitter with
But everyone has the right to be offended, and that's okay, you know.
That's right. But you see,
That's not an injury. That's just being offended, you know.
Yeah, and you need to. You have to exercise your right to be offended.
Yes, yes, and learn how to do it well, you know.
Yeah.
Not make it to a personal attack on you. But I don't want to give the false accusers advice here. You know, they need help. The false accusers need help, and woe betide them. I mean, there is karma. You know, you think, oh, this is I can just do this and get away with it. No, the shoe will be on the other foot someday.
Yep. My mother used to say the wheels of the gods grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine.
They do, yes. You know, I have risen to international prominence several times since this happened, including as one of the documenters of the COVID test fraud. I'm probably the most knowledgeable person on COVID test fraud and fraud with the viral sequences, and became very well known around the world on
Interesting.
on that issue.
I didn't know that.
And
The
then
PCR mess.
PCR, a complete disaster.
Yep,
It's not
yep,
a bit
it's
of
fraud.
validity to it. And
It
then
was never meant to do that, eh?
No, not at all. No, it's
Right.
it's finding impurities in wine or something like that. And then the second thing
Yeah.
was that I was out front of the East Palestine train wreck because I really one of the only journalists who has bona fides in dioxin broke that story internationally, and you know, was on every one of the most popular podcasts, from Dennis Bernstein, far left lunatic fringe, to Alex Jones, far right lunatic fringe. Those guys kept inviting me back, and I was giving the same presentation no matter what platform I was on.
Interesting.
For thousands and thousands of a global audience, and
Yep.
so it's like, well, you know, that's it. My job is to survive and to keep doing what I do, and to live, to write, and serve another day, and to set a good example in what I'm doing, by not only being a person of character, but acting that way when
good.
the time comes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good deal. And we will leave a link below to Planet Wave so you can go check out the things Eric's talking about, which is fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating. So are we finished?
I think so. You know, there's so many dynamics encrypted in this that I think
Yes.
prove out the issues that show how petty this all is.
Yes. Good
so
word.
there's a lot of gems in there, and I'm available to help people as a volunteer, as a professional. I've learned a lot about crisis public relations. That's on my shingle. So if you're in a situation where crisis public relations is an issue, I know how to do that, and the people I care about are all on. They know I'm on call.
Good deal.
Show
Very
up at
good.
7 o'clock the next morning to
Very
help,
good.
help straighten this out, because
So thank you very much, Eric. It's been a joy, and a fascinating joy at that.
and Janice,
Yeah.
I love you more every day.
Me
I'm not
too.
the only one.
Oops. Not me too. Me also.
Larry Allen in Australia, Motorhead down in Australia, who introduced me to you, and you know, you were are a prominent public person who was already onto this issue in ways that I was not, and now I get it. And like you, I was an avowed feminist, and then I realized, wait a second, there's something wrong here.
Yes. Amen to that. That's a good note to end on.
Well,
Dignity,
thank
There's
you.
something wrong here. Indeed,
Yeah,
there
very
is.
much.
We're not talking about men and women not treating each other with respect. We're not talking about
Right,
being
right,
against that. We're talking about a branch of philosophy that's
right.
pernicious and mendacious and toxic ultimately.
Yeah.
Indeed. And we always end by saying, men.
Are.
Good.
All right. Yes,
In New
we.
York now, and I listen to the Scanner, and I'm always thinking about the guys who are pumping out people's basements and climbing up and getting the wires out. This has been
Yeah.
going on
Yes.
all night long. Massive flooding here in New York, and that's it. The scanner is going off every 10 seconds, and it's
Yep.
more men, almost all of them,
All of
men
them.
called to address the flooding in the basement and the wires down,
Yeah.
and work and not sleep for 36 hours.
Without men, we'd be living in little huts made out of thatch.
Yeah.
Indeed. So men are indeed good, and we'll see you next time. You all take good care.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you then.
Eric.
Bye bye. Thank you very
Thank
much. Bye bye. Men are good, as are you.